Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Clockwork Game Dev Show. My name is Keith Burgun. It is nice to have you. Today we are going to talk about auto battlers. So these are games like Dota Auto Chess. That was I think the original one, which was a mod for Dota 2. I'm not sure if there's history that goes beyond that. Before that, explicitly, that would be part of this sort of tradition. It started like I don't know a year ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And then Dota, Valve made their own one that was like an official one called Underlords. And then League quickly made their own one called Teamfight Tactics, which we're going to look at this article today, which is an article about Teamfight Tactics and what Riot's objectives are with that. I may wait for a little bit for people to show up before getting too into it, but I also may just blow on in through for the download version, because a lot of people watch these streams in the downloaded version. And so the few things that we'll be doing today are so this is yesterday, so we'll do auto battlers, and then we'll go into some Gem Wizards tactics if there's more time on the other end. I'm just gonna wait a minute for stuff to going. Okay, good. We got the ping. So yeah, let me know if you are here and you're ready, and I'm gonna get started. Auto battlers. I'm gonna start up this document here. We can call them as a genre. I have a feeling I'm gonna want to change what that. Hey, Dad Nista. I'm gonna want to change what the name of that genre is, but that's fine for now. Yeah, so we're going to talk about what they are and how could you make a better one, etc., etc. So, I guess let's talk about this. This is kind of nice because, Riot, I talk about Riot a lot as having some design sensibilities that I appreciate. Which is definitely true. I don't know about the TFT team, if they are distinct people with their own values and stuff, but let's see here. Teamfight Tactics is our take on the auto battler genre. It's just weird to me when something gets called a genre, when it's like clearly people are just making clones and slight variations of this one game, but that's the world we live in. Dota Auto Chess inspired earlier this year, and we couldn't be more excited to get it to your hands. Many of us fell in love with the genre when it first emerged. I love that it was a genre right when the fucking first game appeared. It's like, wow, look at this new genre game. Like, it's not... whatever. And like some of you, we couldn't help but wonder what an auto battler based in the League of Legends multiverse could look like. Every game is a genre unto itself. There you go. I mean, ideally that would be the case, I think, like, if you look at, like, board games, it's more like that. It's like, wow, the patchwork genre. The, Tigris and Euphrates genre. When I first played Tigris and Euphrates, I was like, wow, I love this genre. The Tigris and Euphrates genre. Okay, many of us fell in love with the genre, blah, blah. What an auto battler, we couldn't help but wonder. Yeah, right. I mean, I also think, like, it was very obvious with, like, this that they were like, we got to get on this, like, right away. This is, like, something that we have to, like, fast follow, sort of. But we couldn't help but wonder what an auto battler based in the League of Legends multiverse could look like. Teamfight Tactics is the result. From drafting your favorite champions, optimizing their trait synergies, equipping them with items, and sending them into the battle, there's a lot we love about this game, and we can't wait to see what you think. I actually think, like, if I was there, like, it would be kind of cool to be like, well, let's just take the draft phase of, like, League of Legends and see if we could, like, so you have, like, 5-on-5, and there's the 5 roles and everything, and you're, like, kind of working around that, and maybe there's some other mechanisms. There could have been, like, a more ambitious thing where they actually really tried to make, like, the League of Legends auto battler. Something that was, like, the champ select, but then sort of, like, automates the game. but then it's somehow still interesting in some way. I don't know. I feel like what they ended up doing was a lot more like, you know, very similar to Dota Auto Chess. And when companies like especially like companies like Valve do that, when they just like clone something like that, doesn't that really signal to you that like we as a civilization don't know what we're doing? Like something just appears and everyone's like, oh my god, people like this, go, make clone it, you know, there doesn't seem to be like a process of like unpacking what is going on there, like how does that thing work, what's the real mechanisms there, and how do we build something new that like takes lessons from that thing. Or maybe there are that, and it's just that, you know, the incentives for a big company are just so, like, you know, Valorant being a really good example of like, our incentives they're not towards being super innovative and experimenting with new things. They're towards, yeah. My first thought on how to improve the auto, Dadnista says, well, my first thought on how to improve the auto battler is to actually use more of the MOBA structure. Yeah, that's one way to go with it, for sure. Use more of the MOBA structure, for sure. I mean, the thing is, like, do these even have a relationship to MOBAs? I'll write that down. Because we're gonna go through some of that stuff after we read this article. Need lane, more choices on when things are going. Positioning matters in these games is very opaque. I agree. Or even random a lot of the time. Yes, very much so. Teamfight tactics is the result from drafting your favorite champions, optimizing their trait synergies, equipping them with items, and sending them into the battle. There's a lot we love about this game. We can't wait to see what you think. Teamfight tactics, I just want to make a note. Positioning is purely opaque for most players. I'm going to talk about that more a little bit later, but blah, blah, blah. Okay. Easy to get into, sort of, but has tons of depth. I'm going to take some time today and talk about our TFT design pillars: mastery, playful competition, and discovery. Like, are those specific enough for design pillars? Like, those are just like what you would do. That's just all strategy games, right? Like, wouldn't all strategy games you want these to be your things? Pretty much. The experience of skill growth is one of the most appealing parts of playing TFT, and there are many skills you can master. Whether you're playing the game for the 100th time or the first, you want to ensure that you feel improvement and growth. And again, this is all just basic strategy game requirements. Therefore, we want to support many areas of masteries when developing the game, and each of these has many sub-skills and points of mastery within. Knowledge. You might emphasize drafting the most powerful champions, assembling complex and interlocking trait strategies, and equipping the best items. If so, you'll need to hone your knowledge of these game elements. Yeah, that's for sure. So this is definitely, this to me is like, honestly, this is everything. This is basically the whole game. Other than the randomness, it's just this. That's my basic feeling about these games. Flexibility. You might play more improvisationally, remaining sensitive to what champions you're seeing in the draft. Well, no, you have to do that. Seizing opportunities that are presented and building compositions flexibly. You have to do that. You have to use the knowledge, and you have to obviously respond to what other people are building. Like, you can't just go for like, well, this is a really great build. I mean, yeah, he's got 2 of the, I don't know, Shyvanas or whatever it is already taken out of the things, but I'm still gonna go for it because it's good. Like, obviously you have to be flexible. To do this, you'll need an understanding of how the game works, aka knowledge, and an open mind to consider the best course of action in any situation. Open mind is kind of weird. Like, I guess somebody with a closed mind just like builds the same thing every time, I suppose. Flexibility. So I think this is like a little bit overrated. This is nothing like this. This is just what you do when you play a game. You can definitely force comps. Hey Ryan, how's it going? Hey Dark. You can definitely force comps. Most high-level players one-trick certain builds. Okay, so in that case, is this not even something that you need to play? I guess this could still be one of their values that they want, and you're saying that they're not achieving this value. In any case, like, you know, obvious to me, like, yes, all strategy games, you know, this is what strategy is, right? Like, if you're not being flexible, if you're not responding to the input coming at you, I don't even think that's a strategy game. I think it's almost more like a puzzle. Like you're just like, oh, okay, I'm entering the solution into this puzzle now. You know what I mean? So this is, yeah, just a fundamentally important thing. Drafting games are basically designed such that it's correct to draft what other people aren't drafting. Right. Yeah, and like I don't even know if I'd call that flexibility. I think in a general sense that's true. Maybe Ryan is saying that they've sort of failed to achieve that with TFT. And so maybe that's not the case in TFT, but that would be a special case situation, I think. Because generally, yeah, like if some people are taking all these cards that are part of your like super build out of play, it doesn't really make sense to continue to chase those. Or at least at some point, right? It wouldn't. Fortune. You might favor the refresh button, giving you a chance to high roll into powerful compositions early. This is terrible. You may be willing to risk a lot on preserving a win streak or finding the perfect item to complete a combo. These lines of play invoke tests of fortune. I like this, like I don't know, there's almost like a supernatural thing here of like test how much luck you have. How lucky are you? Measure your luck power. The skill of managing luck and unpredictable outcomes, both good and bad. This is, I mean, the thing is like the skill of managing luck, that's actually this. Like, to the extent that this is good, it's actually over here, right? Because like the flexibility is, look, remaining sensitive to what champions you're seeing in the draft, seizing opportunities that are presented, building so like a lot of this is like what cards come out, what are other players doing with those cards, and then responding to that. And that's the good part of the skill of managing luck. And again, that all just relies on knowledge. If you know enough about the system, if you just know enough about the rules, the components, then you can do that. Let me catch up on the chat. Auto battlers feel too much about building one of the two to four builds are good right now in the meta. Yes, that is true. And again, that's a knowledge test. It's all a knowledge test. That's basically my theme here. And that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but I do think that that's not a great strategy game thing. It's almost more like this big, slow puzzle. And everyone's like sort of solving this puzzle together. Anyways, test of fortune, yeah. My luck stat is at 18. You can definitely need to pivot if you're getting cut, but that's less likely than just being able to force IMO. Yeah, I'm not sure about that either way in specifically TFT. But what I would say is generally in all strategy games, you want players to have to respond to stuff, right? Like if you're saying the player can just blow through with his like Zergling Rush or his whatever it is, and it doesn't even matter what the other players are doing. They can just do their thing. That's certainly a bad thing, too. A player trusts the designers. EY Priest says, a player trusts the designers that a strategy that's present is viable. Right. Yeah. That's why they have to change all the units every few months. Yeah, so this comes also, we'll talk about like CCGs and like the CCG sort of idea and mindset, and it's kind of interesting to see like how there's this like overlaying of like you know, drafting card games, which a lot of times are not CCGs. I guess some like MOBA influence and CCGs like, you know, Magic the Gathering, and how those are like being blended together here, and there's some interesting stuff there, for sure. Let's get through the rest of this article, and then I have some thoughts. Perhaps you will, okay, fortune, this is just silly a little bit. Perception, perhaps you'll, like this, you know, for me, I think that there should be no refresh button in a strategy game. There should be no, like, spend a few dollars to, like, re-roll what, you know, and like, hope you get lucky. Like, that's the exact opposite. You should be working really hard to make sure that your randomness is the opposite of that. That you're as far away from that as possible. this trading of a non-random resource for a random resource, because then you're just like you're basically inviting these hugely variant outcomes. Because like, oh wow, this time I re-rolled once and I just got the things I wanted, and then this time I had to re-roll 6 times and I got like some kind of thing that was like okay, you know. So this is the opposite. If I was telling someone how to use randomness in strategy games, I would say do the opposite of whatever this is. Which of course is like input randomness, info horizon, trying to use things like you know, without replacement randomness, bag randomness, things like that to sort of, you know, mitigate the amount of variance in your randomness. All right, perception. Perhaps you will study the moves of your opponents. Perhaps you will? I mean, I think you definitely will, right? What do you mean perhaps you will? TFT rewards your understanding of each match. Pay attention to what champions and strategies are left open to what builds your opponents are pursuing. Of course. I mean, and this is the flexibility. I thought. I mean, I guess this could be just talking about the card draws. Through careful perception, you can draft copies of open champions and build teams that counter the strengths of your opponents. Yeah. So this and this, flexibility and perception, are inherently tied together. They are just in every strategy game. If you're not doing these two things, if you're not doing being flexible, and if you're not like perceiving what other players are doing, what other information is coming into the system, you're not playing a strategy game. I agree there are 7 opponents. Hard, and it is hard to perceive all of that for sure. It is, but in the same way, it's like hard to perceive in chess, you know, all of what's happening elsewhere. The point is, you have to whatever extent you can, you have to perceive that stuff and respond to it. I mean, that's like undeniably, this is not a perhaps. Like, this is like, if you're going to be playing this game, you have to do this. And if it's not the case that you have to do this, then we have a real problem, where players can just like automate their play and just do the same thing regardless of what other players are doing. TFT rewards your understanding of each match. Pay attention to what champions and strategies are left open and what builds your opponents are pursuing. Through careful perception, you can draft copies of... Yeah, we already read that. Speed. TFT is a complex game with a lot to think about. It has a turn timer, basically. Speed of judgment will allow you to gain an edge on opponents who hesitate and second guess. Forging forward with confidence will give you the time you need to lay plans and anticipate next steps. So this is a good time to talk about when, like, you know, why I'm sort of against turn timers as a solution, or I'm not against turn timers, but I think that they don't really solve the problem. They could be part of a solution to a problem, and I think that on a practical level, they're useful sometimes. EY Pre says, my issue with the speed of TFT is that it puts a timer on knowledge checks. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is too, like, there is some, like, you know, calculation and all this stuff that's happening. And basically it's just, yeah, the more you just know, again, it's all going to come down to this knowledge. The more you just know this stuff, the more calculation you can do, I guess, in terms, to the extent that there is any calculation to do. And so the timer doesn't really change too much. The timer is mostly just a practical thing that just makes the game, you know, not take more than a freaking hour, which, by the way, that's another issue I have with these games, is they take way too long. If TFT took like 15-20 minutes to play, I could see playing it as like a fun little blah blah blah. But every single time I've ever played TFT or any of the auto battlers, about like halfway through, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get a little tired of this now. Like, I feel like this should have wrapped up by now. And then it just keeps going and going and going. TFT is just so stressful with having to click super quickly through shop and find the stuff that you want really fast. Yeah, no, I agree. And you could argue like that's the skill of the game, and to some extent it is, because it's knowledge based, right? Like, it's, you know exactly what items you need, and the problem is, yeah, a lot of that is like, you don't need to use flexibility. You don't need to use perception. You kind of do just have to know what the best things are. Maybe you have to a little bit respond to things. We've designed TFT to allow mastery growth across these domains. How you choose to play with TFT changes which areas of mastery are emphasized. How you choose to play. Like, this is also like a weird thing. Like, they're sort of framing this like, hey, if you want, you could be like a perception player. I have no knowledge at all, but I just use perception to try to win. And like, or like, I'm a speed player. I don't look at what's happening on the game. I just do everything fast. Or if I'm a fortune player, I just click the reroll button a lot and hope that I jackpot into winning. And like, that's not it. Every single player has to do all of these things. All of them. How you choose to play changes which areas of now, of course, there's maybe different levels of emphasis, perhaps, I guess. But I don't think there probably are. I think everyone probably plays these games more or less the same way. I suppose people who play really seriously might start doing things more in a focused way. We also felt it was important to de-emphasize some other skills so these could really take center stage. For example, TFT won't reward you after click for having the click accuracy to reach 300 CS. What is CS? Like, that's just weird. CS is from a different game. They're like, it's like, I guess they're just saying like it doesn't have a lot of like specific micro execution. Oh, I see. The reaction speed to flash out of skill shots. Right, it's not a real-time game. It's a turn-based game. So obviously it doesn't have any of these things. You could just say that TFT is a turn-based game, and that's it. Mastery is foundational to the auto battler genre. And we're excited about the approach we've taken. Okay, great. Playful competition. So what's unique about Teamfight Tactics? Beyond delivering a deep and rewarding game, TFT is also a shared experience. One that is competitive and challenging. Positive adjectives. Playful competition is about fostering a joyful attitude towards your competitors and the game, taking the game seriously, but all delighting in the shared tactical about playful. Is this just an ad? Am I reading an ad right now? Playful competition has motivated us to build several features into TFT. Paired matchmaking in each round of TFT will be paired up with one of your opponents. One of you will journey through a swirling portal along with your team to visit the other player's arena. Oh yeah, this was a I forget the thing here. This was something here. TFT is not so secretly a real-time game. How is it a real-time game? They're contrasting. Yeah. I got that they were just for some reason. So wait, is there actually ambiguity about whether this is a turn-based or real-time game? I guess we'll write a thing about that. To me, it's absolutely a turn-based game that just has a sort of like a mini like smashing together of the units phase where players have no agency. Like that smashing together of the units. That's more like in my game, Gen Wizards Tactics. There's all these equations that happen, right? And that doesn't, the equations all are interacting with each other when the units fight each other. That doesn't make it real time. And yes, there is a visual representation that looks real time and like is being expressed in a sort of real time, continuous space sort of way. But it could be expressed mathematically. Like you could express that all as just equations and just have it instantly. What's it called? Hey, Unparalleled Dev. You could just have the auto battler thing. For example, the fighting in the auto battlers, you could just auto resolve that instantaneously, right? Like you could, and the game would be exactly the same. Quick shopping is very real time. Is that just because there's a turn timer? I'm trying to think, because like, I think like think about like some card games you've played that have a turn timer, right? Like it's like you like flip a little, one of those like hourglasses or whatever, and you can like do certain actions and whatever until the hourglass runs out. I wouldn't call those real time. I would call those turn-based with a timer. The combat is also not gameplay. So I thought maybe you were talking about the combat. Buy things, move onto your board. Yeah, it's the same as like playing chess with a timer. You know, there's all these, like, you can. Yeah, so it's turn-based with a timer. Do we agree? I'm just curious if anyone disagrees with that, because to me the idea that it would be a real-time game is strange. But the fact that they said this makes me think, like, do they not know that this is a turn-based game? I guess, like, in some ways, you know, because it has very discrete phases, very discrete, you know, like you play. I think that maybe people think it's like real time because, like, the way that you play your cards into play, like, you can like put them forward, put them back, put them forward, put them back. But to me, that's just like in a turn-based card game, being able to hit undo or something before you like lock in your turn. You know what I mean? What the timer does means there's serious execution elements. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. It's not like chess with a timer, but it is like Hearthstone with a timer or something like that. I mean, Hearthstone has a timer, and if there are situations where like Runeterra or something, like where you're like making all these inputs, you're like taking a card back, you're like putting it in, putting it back, you're like calculating out, you're like and then you like hit the like end turn button. You know what I mean? Anyways, let's move on from there. Paired matchmaking. I don't care terribly about this. Whenever someone starts a sentence or paragraph with "we're excited about," you can pretty much always skip that paragraph because it's like marketing. Another feature that pushes playful comments, shared draft. Oh god, the carousel. I forgot about this fucking thing. Ugh. Ridiculous. If it sounds crazy, it is. And that's the thing too, like, I mean, the one way I can sort of appreciate this game is like, okay, it's like this big like Mario Party, silly, you know, party game kind of thing. And that, in that context, I think they should go push that further. Have there be like weird WarioWare shit that like Darius has to do and stuff. That would be cool. I think that'd be a fun. I think they should make it into a party game. That would be a really great place to take TFT, and people would enjoy it, and yeah, it would make it less solvable, and yeah, I think that's the way to go, personally. But let's talk about Hearthstone has this as well, but the situation where it matters is kind of rare. I agree. You're up against the timer more in this game because there's more you can do. Yeah, I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that it's real time. That just means, like, you know, like, if, for example, if I set the turn timer twice as long, now it's, like, definitely not a real-time game. You know what I mean? Or you just, yeah. If you turn the turn timer off, also, you could just turn the turn timer off in this game. And then it's very clearly a turn-based game. And I think it's clear that adding a timer to a turn-based game does not make it a real-time game. But I do agree that, like, you know, it can create some of the stresses of a real-time game that are familiar to real-time games. Okay. New champions, blah blah blah. This is getting all whatever. Okay. Let's see. We have this other article by Eric Park. Dad Nista sent me this. Helps with pacing. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is that these games are so freaking long already. It's like, every single time I played any of these games, halfway through, I'm like, oh my god, this is still going on. And it feels like it never ends. And part of it is, it has to be that long because it's so random that you need to, like, shake out the meaning, to get something, you know, basically it's like, with poker, you can't just play one hand of poker. You kind of can't just play 3 hands of poker either. You need to play like a bunch of hands of poker to find out who's actually better. And I think it's a similar thing here. So that's part of why it's so long. But yes, because it's so long, they need to add a pretty harsh turn timer on there to make sure that, just on a practical level, like, the game would be like 2 hours long if it didn't have a turn timer. 2-3 hours long. Real-time elements. I don't know what that means. It has features that are familiar to real-time, but it doesn't, like, a system is either in real-time or it is in turn-based. It's like, that's kind of a binary. There's real-time and turn-based is a false dichotomy. I disagree with that. I think that's a pretty true dichotomy. Like, either time is made into discrete chunks or time is continuous. I don't see any in between discrete and continuous. And those are what real-time and turn-based mean. I agree that, like, aesthetically, in terms of how it feels, there may be like a continuum there. Like, there may be like things that, like, oh, this feels more real-timey. For example, Prismata, especially in Blitz mode, can feel a little bit real-time-esque, right? Like, it like sort of feels like you're playing StarCraft or something, because you're like loaded, you know, doing all these things really fast, blah, blah, blah. It's still technically turn-based. So I don't think that this game may aesthetically fall in the middle, but it's not in the middle. It is a turn-based game. Like, Stone Cold turn-based game just has a timer, and that gives it some of the properties, like the feel properties, the gameplay feeling properties of a real-time game. But I think it's important to maintain and be clear about what it actually is. That it has discrete phases. It has turns. Yeah. Okay. The rolling thing is real time, but you also get new stuff in discrete intervals. Like, rolling is in real time? That's an interesting question. I guess I wonder if that is in real time. Maybe you're right about that. Yeah, you might actually be right about that. That the re-rolls might be in real time because there's no limit on. You can just play them as fast as you want. No, but you know what the thing is though? I still think that's within the realm of turn-based, because like if you think about it in turn-based games, so think about this, like in Agricola or something. Yeah. It's the same as like in a turn-based game, a traditional turn-based game, like let's say Agricola or something. You have like 3 or 4 actions that you can do. You can do those all really, really fast if you want, or you can do them like really slow and ploddingly. And there's some resource limit on how many times you can do them. Like for example, in Agricola, you have like 3 workers or whatever, or 2 workers, and that's how many actions you can take. But then like there's all these like sub actions and extra things you can do, and you can do them at any rate you want. I don't think that makes that real time. Real time has to. I think if what you're talking about was real time, it would have to be that the time itself was like a resource that was interacting with other things in the game, like the other players, and was like, to me, the real time you're talking about is like, it's just shuffling things around at a race, you spend money to reroll. Exactly, right, yes. Is Go turn-based or real time when you play with a clock? I mean, it's turn-based, obviously. That's my point here, is that adding a timer to a turn-based game does not make it real time. So I don't think that rolling is actually real time. I understand why it feels real time. You can do them at any moment you want, but that's true of turn-based games too. If you have a bunch of actions that you can do inside of a turn-based game. Gem Wizard's Tactics, for example, like I can kind of like do my moves really fast, and I can like, use my abilities quickly and whatever, or I can do them slowly. But that doesn't mean it's actually real time. A key component to real time is other things happening even if you aren't. Yes, that's true. Yes, exactly. Like the time is actually there's a shared time among the other players and other agents that is, other things happening even if you aren't. I think that's a good way of putting it. I don't think that like nails it exactly, but that's getting at the essence of what would make something real time. Whereas I can do things faster or slower doesn't make it real time. Let's see. Other people buying units removes them from the pool. That's an interesting point. Timers are part of the game. That's true. You can't just ignore timers. Yeah, but you could theoretically turn the timer off. So if you're slow, you're missing opportunity to buy those units. That's a really good point Ryan makes. And I think that actually does make it real time. In the same way that, like, I'm thinking of, like, Galaxy Trucker. It's a real time board game. Where, like, or any of those games where it's like there's a bunch of cards on the table and people have to, like, slap at them and grab them quickly. It's like that, and that is real time. That's a situation where it actually is real time. Okay, so you've changed my mind. Clockwork Game Dev Show first. So that's real time, and that's hideous. But yes, that is. Okay, so let me change my opinion here. It's kind of actually, you know what it's like? It's a little bit like American football style, where we now have to break it down. Most of the game is turn-based, I think. Or wait, now because you can do the reroll shit anytime, right? So if you could do the reroll shit at any time, it's more like American football. So there's these real-time phases. Which are real-time. Jeez Louise. This just made me like these games so much less just now. Because I didn't consciously put it together that, like, because I knew that other players would be taking things out of the pool. I understood that concept, but it didn't, like, I didn't click together that, like, oh yeah, that means I have to do shit, like, fast. Like, it's not just good enough to do all the things that I want to do within the turn time. I actually have to outrace the other players. Oh God, what a nightmare. Oh my God, I'm gonna vomit. All right. Anyways. Okay. Let's see. Let's read this article. I'm glad we got through all that. Okay, it's time to talk about auto battlers. They have been on the rise. This is an article by someone named Eric Park. I don't know who Eric Park is, but this was sent to us by Dadanista. That time sensitivity only matters at the highest level of play. Well, no, I mean, it always matters. You just might not notice it until it's the highest levels of play. But it's always, like, it always matters. No wonder I could never find the units I needed. Okay, auto battlers on the rise, blah blah blah. Dodo auto chess, blah blah blah. Yep. What is the formula? Subgenre of turn-based strategy game where the player purchases units of increasing strength within random occurrences to fight others in a free-for-all format. Weird. Unlike the similar deck builder game strategy games, Auto battlers focus mainly on strategically building decks on the go. 8 players fight off in a free-for-all format. Last one standing wins. Yeah, this is like a whole nother thing we could talk about too. Golds and preparation time before every round. I don't need the list of the rules. Strategy and randomness are the two guiding factors of this formula. Player skill is largely focused on having good luck. I like this. This is a good sentence right here. Player skill is largely focused on having good luck. So, in other words, like what is player skill? And knowing their item compositions, units, synergies more so than mechanical skill or reflexes, traits that are commonly valued in traditional RTSs or MOBAs. the genre this game mode originally came from. I think the relationship, I think that a lot of people overstate the similarity between these, like, you know, lane pushers or MOBAs and these games. I think they're not very similar at all. I think that people think they're similar because they use the software to make this app, but they're not. And also because, like, I guess probably League, you know, Riot made that problem worse by putting TFT into the League of Legends app, which, by the way, they need to get rid of that shit. Just get that out of there. It's, like, really annoying that there's this totally different game in my game. Let's see. Hearthstone or Clash Royale. Clash of Clans. Decks are built on the go, improved on the go. Kippy Head said that auto battlers maximize variance, where randomness gives the player a set of tools to work with, and it's up to the player how to decide to use them. I think this sounds like input randomness. For strategy and uncertainty, where the player does not know the outcome because it's random. This looks like output randomness here. Translating into KB Games language. More and more games are starting to add new features. The original format. Pokemon Auto Chess. Okay. I don't know. This doesn't seem to really have much for in terms of what we are talking about. Okay, so like, what are auto battlers? Let's what are they? I always saw them as drafting games, right? They're basically drafting games with an extremely complex and convoluted what would you call it? Like a resolution phase. I think that's pretty much what they are. Actually, but they're even worse than that. Because they're actually, as we just discovered, real-time drafting games. Just think of that. Real-time drafting games. Think about sitting around a room and there's like a bunch of cards like that can be drafted, and instead of, like, you know, Seven Wonders style or, you know, games like that, traditional drafting games, they're all out on the table and you just have to, like, just grab at them, you know, quickly. That's kind of what that is. And then it has an extremely complex and convoluted combat resolution phase. Is there anything else to it? I mean, oh yeah, so then it has other weird systems like that. I would want to talk about the interest system. I think there's a lot to say about that. Maximizes variance, right? That's why I always see the same 3 to 4 meta comps. Here's an idea. Auto battler, but instead of having the same unit pool every match, the unit pool is randomly assembled, like in Dominion or Prismata. That would be good. Yeah, oh yeah, they don't even do that? I would think that they would take some units out of the pool at the beginning of the game. Randomly. That's like a no-brainer, I feel like. Yeah, and actually it would be even better. All right, how to make them better. Here's what I would do, and feel free to fight me on any of these. You either can't place your units at all, or there's some extremely simple, you know, placement mechanism. That's one way to do it, because it's a drafting game. Fundamentally, it's about the drafting. The drafting is the core of the gameplay. So this needs to be, like, really minimized. So that's one thing I would do. Yes. Actually start. You know, start the match with, like, I don't know, 1/6 the total set. each new round, tell everyone which new random cards have been added to the pool. By the end of the game, you know, I don't know, like 3/4 of the entire set is made available. So there's still some missing, but like you have incremental more introduction of which things are getting added, and that should be known to everybody, I think. Yeah, I mean, basically, honestly, like I think a better auto battler would be would just be a drafting game. So like that's I mean, let me put that here. Like I think it would just be better if it was just like Seven Wonders or Fairy Tail or any drafting game would just be better. Let's see. How would you communicate what units are in or out of the pool? Well, A, you can just see it by getting hands. Yeah, I mean, obviously I would write this, like, get rid of reroll entirely, obviously. This is just pure gambling. Has no place in a strategy game. Let's write this. Strategy game. Alternatively, dive into, you know, being a party gambling game. Here's the other way you could go with it. More shit like reroll. You know, like, bidding systems. Fucking Yomi rock, paper, scissors battles. WarioWare you know, challenges. Whatever. Like, and you could have that be like, this could be really like character-y, right? Like, so like Darius has like his own little WarioWare game that's like based on Darius's abilities and, you know, his like hook and like his like choppy circle thing. So you come up with some little dumbass, you know, WarioWare game that's like that. That'd be great. I wouldn't want to play it, but like it would be a cool thing, you know? Yeah. Yeah, this is basically normal drafting game. Let's see. Problem is if you add stuff incrementally is that you just kind of get randomly screwed. That's true. Well, hello, that's drafting games, right? I mean, that's true in all the drafting games. You know, it's expressed a little bit differently in each game, but yeah. So I mean, and then the third option is making a way better game out of this. Would be just like do game design, you know, and actually design a system that can use drafting, but which is, you know, complex. Yeah, let's just say a complex system that can use drafting. So that's hard. This is the hardest thing to do. I can number these so I can refer to them. So actually, let's just make this named, yeah. See, it's funny because my first thought was to expand the placement stuff and give players some choices. Yeah, that's sort of what we would do in this option 3. Some more choices on where to deploy units based on different priorities. Yeah, so you could do that with this. So, and that could be like, yeah, like using structure in terms of like, maybe there's like some kind of lanes or patrol zone things. Or, you know, who knows, worker placement. There's a million different things that you could do here. This is literally just designing a game. basically from scratch. You want to econ, send some of your units to the jungle. Yeah, you could do that kind of stuff. Yeah. You always want to econ, not in a balanced game. Triangle. Yeah. Yeah, you don't always want to econ, or at least you shouldn't want to always econ. I think probably in a lot of games you do always want to econ. Rushdown is not a thing because it's an 8-player game. Yeah, so that's another thing. Is like, 8 players is too many. Why is it 8 players? Does anyone know? Like, yeah, does it have to be an 8-player game? That seems like a lot of players. Were they trying to outdo Seven Wonders? This one would probably be way less, the one-on-one, or 1 player even. This one could be 8-player. 8 players or more. Fuck it. Like for party games, I think that could be great. That could be like, you could do weird stuff, like you could have like you team up, you ally up with somebody and have these dynamic teams, and that'd be great. I don't know if the battle royale format is the best thing for this. Yeah, I agree. That's now for this though. I think battle royale is fine. I think that this, for a party/gambling game, I think that setup is good. But yeah, for a normal drafting game, no. One-on-one. I mean, I could see this being like, actually for a normal drafting game, it could be 1 to 4 players. Maybe 1 to 5 players even, something like that. 1 to 4 or 5 players. Maybe 4 is a little safer. 5 is a little much, because you do want to allow someone to do something like theoretically. I mean, I will say that drafting games typically don't have things like Rushdown. They have their own slew of problems as they exist. The point is long-term MMR growth. Let's see. Bracket series. 8 players removes the binary win-loss. That's true. Mitigates some of the variance. Well, yeah. I mean, it mitigates your sort of ability to measure the variance. I think is really the way that that's with the binary win-loss, the variance is very apparent. Whereas where it's like, the 8 players. And that's especially good for party games, gambling games. I don't think you want to do that for like a serious strategy game. Serious strategy game. Sushi Go is Battle Royale plus, and it plays pretty good. Yeah, and Sushi Go it's kind of like something between these two things, right? It's kind of like Yeah, the player elimination is probably not great for this. Let's add that, like, no player elimination, which wouldn't be hard to engineer at all. I had an idea where you're randomly matched up with 3 other players, and you have multiple lanes, each representing another player, and you can assign units to each one. But there are some problems there. I think that's a good thought, but it's like, okay, now spend like a year designing that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just doing game design. I think player elimination for a party game, gambling game, social game is bad. For a normal drafting game, I don't really care. It could stay or not, doesn't matter. For a serious strategy game, player elimination wouldn't be a thing because it would be 1-on-1 or 1 player. 1 to 2 players, therefore no player elimination. The Battle Royale style player elimination in an online game gets rid of all the bad things. Player elimination. I don't. That's a good question. Actor removal causes FFA problems. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the FFA problems. I don't know if we've talked about those on this show before, but so I mean, the thing with drafting games is like, it's funny because like they deal with kingmaker problems by basically not letting players interact with each other very much. Very little, like it's hard to be a kingmaker in a drafting game because You can't do anything, really. The player elimination bit in a drafting game is interesting, though, because if you eliminate someone, their units go back into the pool. That is kind of an interesting thing, for sure. Oh god, yeah, the interest system. I forgot to talk about that. The interest system is like one of these things that you could slap into any game, I feel like. To like create this really cheap sense of like, let's just write, like, basically could fit into almost any game ever. Yeah, ever, pretty much. Is an extremely cheap and thin way to create something like, you know, investment, or like to create a very light sense of investment or econ strategies. Of course, though, I don't know if it's still this way, but when I played these games, you know, because it's just this slapped-on rule. I'll just write this. Because it's just this slapped-on rule that has very little, what is it called? Connection with the rest of the system, I guess. We had a word for that the other day, or not the other day, a few months ago. We were talking about coupling with the rest of the system. Coupling. Players quickly solve it. You know, save up to 50 gold every game. Right? Like that's how it worked when I played. I don't know if they've done something to change that, but the way it worked before was if you every 10 gold you have at the end of the turn, you would gain 1 more gold at the end of the turn, up to 50. So players would just like sit and hover on 50 gold, exactly, right? And this is a good example of like why like these thin slapped on rules have very limited utility. They don't really do that much for it, because if everyone's just hovering at 50 gold, it's like, well, shit, you can just delete the whole fucking system then. Now there are still, you know, situations where, okay, like, you know, now I'm gonna not hover at 50 gold. But what I would do if I was, you know, if I were getting, I wouldn't use a system like this at all. I think that the reason that this has to be so slapped on is because there's nothing going on. There's nothing in the system other than the cards that are being dealt out. There's no systemic, there's no structure. Lack of any structure requires this system to be so thin and isolated. Does that all kind of make sense? I don't know how it works in TFT, but in other words, it checks your money at the start of the battle for interest. So what you do is just wait to do your rerolling until the units are fighting. Right. I don't remember the specifics of that, but it's something like that. And like whatever it is, it's just going to be some solvable thing, right? Like maybe it's a little different in Underlords and TFT, but because it's such a simple numeric thing where it's just like for every 10 gold you get blah blah blah, and there's no other like connections between that system to anything else, it's just going to be this, there's going to be some solution that players are all just like, okay, yeah, just do blank. So yeah, the interest system is bad. I also want to talk about a little bit about what this game represents, kind of. You know, like what does auto chess represent or mean for game design in 2020? To me, here's what, so let's like write like pros and cons, I guess. Like pros. So some things I like about it. Some degree of pulling away from execution, from micro execution stuff. Right? Hey, Bricks Parts, how's it going? We're talking about auto battlers today. Um, yeah, so some degree of pulling away from micro execution stuff. You came in at a good time, because we're about to talk about this. We just had talked a lot about auto battlers and what they are. What I said was that they're real-time drafting games with an extremely complex and convoluted combat resolution phase. That's pretty much what they are. They have a couple other things, but that's pretty much it. Yeah. Some degree of pulling away from micro / execution stuff. Some degree of, or like, how do I put this? Like, more of an, like, the inclusion of drafting as a mechanism, and the abstractness of the rule set feels like it feels like they're getting comfortable with board games. A step towards inviting board game style, game design, I guess you could say, into video games. That's to me that one should be, that's number one, because to me it represents like a beginnings of a merging of video and tabletop games, right? Which I guess this could be italics instead. Yeah. Less micro, less execution. I think that there's a lot of people out there who are starting to, I think a lot about something that David Serlin once told me, which was like, I know what it would take to get better at StarCraft, and I don't want to do that. Serlin said, I know what it would take to get better at StarCraft, and I don't want to do that, right? And I think that people, I'm not sure about this, but I think that there's probably an increasing number of people who feel that way about execution in games. Of course, Valorant comes along, and I guess we'll see how that goes. I don't know how popular that's been, but that would certainly be cutting the other way. His fighting game is way less cake baking than most fighting games I saw. Has a lot of cake baking IMO. I think I agree with that. I forget what you mean by cake baking. Feel free to explain that. I forgot what. I remember he had some metaphor about that, like other skills that are like external to the system itself. Yeah, I think you're right. He does have that. Execution is one form of that. Yeah. Well, I should write within, like, it's within the sphere of esports, hardcore gaming games, right? That's really what it is, because there's always been no execution games, but it's like, this is a low execution game that's like an esport, that's like that's sort of framed as that's being developed by Riot, et cetera, and yet it doesn't have execution. So that's a big difference. Are there other pros? Oh God, there's a huge pro, and this is the other day on Twitter. I said, let's see if I can find it. I said, like, oh yeah, I remember what I said. I said, I'll write that here. But this is one of my favorite things about auto chess, is that there's no pre-game decisions at all. Furthermore, there isn't any unlockables or or like yeah, unlockable stuff, gameplay stuff at all. From day one, you have all of the stuff you need to play the game. Like, I can't put enough exclamation points on that, right? Like, that's so huge. That's amazing. I can't believe we have a game where you can just download the game and then you could just play the game right away and you have all the stuff. You can just be the best at the game right then and there if you knew what to do. That's just incredible. Let's see. Valorant's going to be mostly people come from FPSs. Yeah, I think Valorant is mostly like, hey, remember CS? All you CS players who are like starting to like maybe drift off or whatever. Like, I think it's really just trying to cash in on the huge amount of Counter-Strike players. I think they looked at like, hey, what are the top Steam games of the last 10 years? It's like, oh shit, Counter-Strike is still like freaking huge. Let's just make that and get those players, and that'll be plenty. And I think that's probably what will happen. Let's see. His game is an 8-frame input buffer. Why not just let you hold the button down? Yeah, I agree. What's CCGs? Brian Bowles says, that's CCGs. I wasn't sure what that was referring to. Sorry, I was a little late in responding there. IMO timing is cake baking, but I guess lots of fighting games players don't agree. Well, the thing is, like, some of the stuff you're talking about that is cake baking, like, that is fighting games. That's the thing, is like, if you actually took out all of the cake baking, as you're calling it, from fighting games, it would be too obvious how boring fighting games are. Like, or to put it another way, like, it would just be it would be nothing. You'd have nothing left. You would just have this empty nothing of a game. And feel free to show me examples where you think that's not the case. Like if anyone's made games like that. You'd have Yomi. Yeah, but Yomi then, of course, replaces... interestingly enough, like, Yomi has a lot more going on, actually, than fighting games do. Because you have, like, hand management, and you have all this stuff, like, powering up for aces, and you have all this, like, powers and buffs and special rules going on. Yomi has a lot more going on than most fighting games I've played, I think. Let's see. I sort of assume that skill in Valorant will be influenced by strategy understanding than in many other FPSs. Yeah, who knows? I don't know. It's kind of a side thing, but I do think just generally the explosion of a mod game into something huge is good, that it can and does happen. Yeah. That I'll put that here too. Continuation of the pattern of a mod, a folk game, exploding in that way, right? Because these people don't have marketing budgets or whatever. This is just something that came out of people, and it got bigger than, I don't know, like anything Valve could publish or whatever. And that's huge. So that is a plus. So these are the pros. They can be in blue, and the cons can be in red. Really shows how, like, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Like, the bad way to say this is, like, it just shows how much we suck at game design. But, like, there's a better way to put it, which is, like, yeah, like, I guess a way to put it is, like, really demonstrates that the professionals, game designers, have no clue how to improve on, a folk design, right? So another way to put that is that, like, we demonstrates that we do not yet have specialist knowledge of strategy game design. Does that make sense? Like, this is a folk design and it looks like one, and it clearly, it appears to be something that emerged out of like just the community messing around and trying stuff out. And then when like a company like Riot, who, again, I think of them as one of the Auto Chess was actually made by a professional indie game studio. I don't know about that. I'll look that up. It'll probably be in the Wikipedia article, right? Drodo Studio. Okay. Well, so then I guess I'll have to X off one of my plus signs. I thought it was just by like some. Who is this Drodo Studio? Do they have a page? Development. They drew inspiration from the Chinese tile game Mahjong. Oh, cool. Spelled up. Okay. That's cool. Interesting. Alright, so we have to X out this, because this is kind of less true now. I don't know how big Drodo Studio is exactly, but let's look them up. Do they have their own like website? I guess it's probably only in Chinese or something. Okay. Interesting. Alright, so I guess this isn't really a pro then, in that case. But in any case, they're at least a smaller studio, and the fact that everyone is just cloning this thing and making these like tiny changes, really, the fact that something got popular, regardless of where it came from, and everyone just made these clones of it with, minor rules, reinforces the idea that professional game designers don't know how to improve on designs, regardless of whether folk or not. Don't know how to improve upon designs. I think that's still a safe thing to say. Right? Like you could imagine a different world where someone made this thing, it became this huge sensation. That's going to happen, and that's going to be surprising. There's always going to be this like moment of inspiration, this like lightning in a bottle type of effect, and people are going to freak out about this thing. And then you could imagine like there's a whole class of people who have all these tools, all this knowledge, and all this like intellectual tools that they can use. Be like, okay, what is this thing doing? Like basically try to do the sort of stuff that we're talking about and thinking about here, but ideally a lot more so, because it's, many people, and they're like, okay, well, here's my take on this I can't believe I almost said genre, on this game idea, and it focused on blank, blah, 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 blank, and it, and that would be a different world where this would not be true. Do I think TFT is not an improvement on Auto Chess? I mean, like, the UI is better, I guess. I didn't think it was an improvement. Like, things like the carousel, like, to me, that's like, so we have no fucking idea what to do. It could have just been it's like a WarioWare game that they just slapped in there. Completely lateral design moves. Absolutely lateral. Absolutely. It doesn't, there's no, there's no attempt to change the what's it called? The interest system is the same. Everything is like the same. There's no attempt to, I guess they changed the item system. That was like their most ambitious thing, if I recall correctly. Almost all improvements that people make within a genre are small and incremental quality of life things, that build up over years and years. Yeah, it's true. And it's one of the reasons that, like, League of Legends... so League of Legends to me is a counterexample here, where particularly things like the elemental dragons, the jungle plants, and what else? Those are the two that always come to mind for me. And the way that the elemental dragons randomize the map, things like that, like those feel like not small incremental quality of life things, but actually like someone taking a principle, a concept, which again, Greg Street talked about in that video. He actually was using the concept of input randomness, just so happened to be something that I talk about a lot, but it doesn't matter. Like, it just has to be specialist knowledge, you know, something that game designers can do that other people can't do. Because, like, this idea of a game coming out and then people make these, like, incremental small changes, like, do you really need game designers for that? Like, do you really need a class of people for that? I feel like programmers and artists, you know, and just like project managers and others can just figure that out. Like, they can be like, well, hey, let's try another item system where, I don't know, like you know, it's like combines a little bit differently or something. Because there's no like there's no like principles or, you know, philosophy behind it, I guess, that and really what that is like knowledge of design, which you know, that's kind of my reason to exist, I think, is like I want there to be more of that. And of course there are people who have been working in game design their whole life and they do have a lot of knowledge, but we don't have a lot of the kind of knowledge, I think, that would allow someone to take a game like this. And I should mention also that, like, there are other pressures here that cause this to be an issue. Certainly in the case of TFT, I mean, like, part of what Riot was doing was, like, we're just have to fast follow this thing. It's just a business decision. In the same way that they did Valorant. Like, if anyone had any doubt that TFT was partially a cynical business move, you know, the reason that it was like such a kind of like a clone, Valorant should really verify that, like, yeah, it absolutely was. Yeah. The only reason I chose TF2 over the other options is because League Champs are easier to grok for me. Yeah, same for me. And also because you don't have to install another app, which is like, becomes annoying once you've decided you don't want to play TFT, but whatever. How many years did it take them to do the Dragons? Many years. At least, I think 5 years? 6 years? Somewhere around there? Long time. Experienced designers, I think, operate more on intuition than principles in general. Yeah, I think so. And intuition is made up of principles. They may not be principles that the person like consciously holds or that would be able to talk about or teach, but there are principles in there. Valorant was no time pressure, though. That was just straight up, let's just use CSGO with better netcode. Yeah, that's true. They could have done that at any point. God, Valorant's such a depressing thing. Okay, cons. What does this mean? Oh, yeah. Here's another con. Serious strategy game players will switch over to a total gambling machine thing, or let's say near total, you know, like a highly random game, and basically not care. That's something that also this game revealed to me. Most people don't hate variants. Yeah. Well, yeah. There's different ways to express it. But this is, for me, what the success of auto chess means is, you know, revealing this. And I guess to me, this would be like, you know, and these two things kind of go together, actually, because, like, you think about, like, something like institutional knowledge about a discipline, right? And as, like, if the specialists are not going to just get good at it on their own, the whole population also, like, learns about this discipline and gets more, they get more tools for how to critically talk about and think about games. as time goes on, and so like the specialists and non-specialists together both over time build up a base of knowledge over certain things, and at certain points in history, you know, knowledge can be really high or really low. There was a point in time when, you know, people's knowledge and literacy, that's another good way of putting it. I think we were talking about this on another episode about literacy, game design literacy. I think, oh, that's right, I talked about that with Knockfisher. I don't know if you're still here, Knockfisher, but we talked about that on the podcast. And so as specialist literacy increases, overall player literacy increases. And so I don't care if people like or dislike really random games. That's not important to me. But the lack of players making a distinction between, you know, they were switching over from, I don't know, I guess like League of Legends, or I don't know where most of the auto chess players come from. I would assume a lot of them came from MOBAs, which I suppose in a way MOBAs are pretty random in the sense, in a weird way, in that, like, you know, you get random opponents and things like that. But I think that MOBAs aesthetically, at the very least, try hard to mitigate that feeling of things are random. Like there are random crits in League for some reason still, but I think that they're like really what's it called? They're like bag randomness, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Like they really try to mitigate that. And there's nothing else in the League that's random like that. Like there's no abilities that's like has a 15% chance to deal blankety blank damage or whatever. It's literally just the random crits, which are actually very out of place in that game. They all came from Hearthstone. Okay, so right. So now if that's true, if these are all Hearthstone players, then this is less true. Then this might be, you know, put this in gray. Because yeah, if you're coming from Hearthstone to auto chess, that makes sense. Very little came from MOBAs. Okay, then in that case, cancel that thought. I don't know if we have any serious strategy game players because we don't really have any serious strategy games by Keith's definition. Yeah. Well, I mean, strategy games, especially as I define them. I mean, we have strategy games. We have plenty of strategy games. Even more so in tabletop world. What do you see as a serious strategy game that is currently popular being played by said players? Which said players? Ryan asks. Serious strategy game being... I mean, you know, I've talked about games like... I think there's a lot of tabletop games that are serious strategy games. Like a ton of them. Probably if we just look on Board Game Geek, the top, you know, most of the top 30 are serious strategy games, or at least 3/4 of them. Some of my favorites are like Puzzle Strike and Race for the Galaxy, and for a long time Puerto Rico was really popular, and I don't know what else we got up here. There's the train games, the 18XX games. Chicago Express is up there, right there. Bloom, 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 bloom. I don't know. Res Arcana, Le Havre, things like that. Said players were the ones you thought were coming to auto chess from serious strategy. Right, I see what you're saying. These games exist in a real way. Oh, outside of board games. Well, why outside of board games? Like, why is that a meaningful distinction? Why should we draw that line? You know, games are games. But even within video games, I mean, I think like, I don't know, the Paradox games, certain like roguelike-y kind of games. Side point, but I do think it's interesting how you very rarely... wait, hold on. Side point, but I do think it's interesting how you very rarely with designer board games see a sort of identitarian relationship with them. Yeah, it's true. No one plays board games relatively? Well, they're much less popular than video games, but they're becoming more and more popular all the time. And yeah, but they're way less popular, that's for sure. And I also think I'd go as far to say is that strategy games will never be as popular as, you know, like serious strategy games will never be as popular as like really random games. Probably will never be as popular as like things that are like sort of in the sport aesthetic. Board gamers have a culture of identifying with your playgroup more, right, and bringing new games to the playgroup. You have people who say, I'm a League of Legends player, in the same way that someone would say I'm a chess player, but you don't really see I'm an Agricola player. That's true. Well, I think part of that is an unfortunate thing about board games. Actually, I want to, this is a new topic, but I just want to talk about this a little bit. So yes, this is true. And the reason for this, I think, is that board games, because they're board games, they can't ever get, there's two problems with them. One is that because they're board games, they're locked into, let me, how do I put this? Like, this is because board games have two factors that keep them from like obtaining sort of like that status of like cultural or like possessing, or like, what's a good word for this? Like gaining a cultural foothold, I guess. Hold in the way that League of Legends can. Maybe more than two factors, but let's start with these two. One is restricted to a small space, right? So like, you can't play with people all over the world. Play Agricola. Wait, what happened? With people all over the world. Really. I mean, you can like talk about it on a forum, I guess. You pretty much have to play with your group. That's part of it. And then the other thing is, you know, board games are really limited by the components. Fiddliness, time to learn the game, what else? And, you know, limitations on the quality and variety of possible rules are major problems for tabletop games. You know, like another way to put this is that like board games have this like crushing low ceiling. They can only get so good. They can kind of only get so good because of practical limitations. And that's why like Prismata is so exciting to me. Things like Prismata and even things like Auto Chess, because both of those to me look like the merging of the board game design aesthetic, which is like, let's make a good rule set. Let's like imagine a new rule set that's good and that like fixes the old problems and that like has sort of like these core mechanism-y kind of concepts and philosophy to it. Merged with the digital, with the computer, basically. So getting rid of these things. So I think Prismata is like, you know, I've talked about the problems that I have with Prismata, but it is so exciting because of that reason. There are some board games that have video game ports. Yes, that's true. But they're ports, so they're still limited. Video game ports, or let's say digital versions of board games, still have the same design limitations of what's it called? Those original board games. And they usually have like no budget, you know, no online, like no or bad online play capacity, nothing like voice chat, etc., etc., etc. Like they're just not developed, really, in the way that like League of Legends is developed as an application. So why do you think more designers are working in that space, marrying the best of board games with video games? Well, let me answer that here. I think I know why. I think it's because of how expensive video games are to make. Especially, and they're not fundamentally expensive. They don't have to be, but because of expectations of like, you know, in terms of art and production values, like you basically have to have like major motion picture, you know, like just really high quality, and by that I mean like expensive looking assets, and production values. Like you have to have, you know, it's got to like be all like juicy and like all these like. There's just so much that goes into it. You know, I'm struggling through all that now with Gem Wizards Tactics. And it's just, there's so much work that you have to do. And so I think that there are like, largely, the way I see it is, there are two groups of people and very little overlap. People who want to make, Well, okay, actually, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, yeah, video games are very expensive to make. Not much overlap between people who, like, care about board game design aesthetic, and people who can afford to make a video game, a proper video game. That's one thing. And then also, like, a lot of people still just don't even know about board games. You know, I still meet a lot of people who have never played a designer board game. Like, there's still a lot of people who, when I talk to them, I'm like, oh, do you play board games? And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, totally. I love board games. Like, I used to play Risk and Monopoly with my grandma, you know? And I'm like, no, that wasn't what I was talking about. That's a different universe. And they just are totally, I mean, the vast majority of people, and this is literacy. This is part of literacy. The vast majority of people who play games, who design games, are mostly or totally unaware of the world of designer board games. So that's a big reason as well. The My Little Pony fighting game made it to EVO because it actually is one of the few fighting games with working netcode. Yeah. Let me catch up with some of this stuff. Prismata is playable with cards. Interesting. Prismata, a tabletop version of Prismata. Yeah, I guess you could play that with cards. I'm trying to think of like how that would go down. Has anyone tried that? Anyway, the counterexample of lifestyle board game would be Magic the Gathering, which is possible because they constantly release new components. Yeah, so that's another thing too, is I was going to answer here. Let's say 2+ factors. Video games, you know, game design, well, strategy game design is going to be, at least for a number of years, a service. You're not going to get it right. That's the thing too about board games. This is a major limitation. Let's just write a number of. Right, you're not gonna just get it right on the first try. On the first edition release, you just aren't. I don't care how much playtesting you have done beforehand, etc., etc., etc. You're just not going to get it right, because once it goes out there and is played by, you know, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people, that's when it's really going to start, you know, you're really going to start getting actual information about how well the system works. And video games are capable of sort of delivering this service in a way that, you know, Agricola can't. Now, the way that, by the way, in terms of specifically the case of Agricola, what's kind of interesting in that case is that Uwe Rosenberg has been basically working on that design for, what, like 20 years now? And Agricola was one of the steps in that road. And Caverna is another. It was actually really cool playing Caverna after playing Agricola, because you could see that this was basically like Agricola number 5, you know? And I think he's done another one since then. And he's done other games that like explore other similar spaces. I need to get going, but hopefully I can catch streams more often. Have you thought of going into your ideas on actor removal and some avenues exploring alternatives in a future stream? Sure, we should do one about actor removal. I haven't done one on that yet. That's a good idea. Let's talk about that. Let's queue that up. Just write that here. Anyway, this is kind of, yeah, I agree with this though. Like Ryan, I think you're right that this is not really a thing. And, I think that I've provided some answers for why that is. I mean, the short answer is, board games just don't have the durability, because they get one shot, and because they had to be simple enough to basically learn to play like pretty quick. Thanks for coming by, Brick Parts. Yeah. But anyway, this is like the future, and I made that graph before of like what's gonna happen. So like, board game design is like up here, and video game design is like down here. And as the two things merge, at the moment when the two things merge, video games are going to shoot up in quality, and board games are going to shoot down in quality, and video games are going to get worse for a little while. And I think that's actually what we're seeing with auto chess. Auto chess is like someone took just like got a glimpse of some board game mechanisms, in this case drafting, but didn't like really dive into them or think deeply about like how and why these systems work or not. And so that you get this thing that's like, it's kind of actually not even as good as a normal drafting game, but it has some of the values of both things, of both video games and board games. And then at some point after that, we're going to get like the two things working together, and the knowledge of that exists in board games, when that gets infused into video games, I think we're going to have like a real renaissance in video games, and I can't wait for that. That's going to be great. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say on Auto Battlers. I think I'm gonna wrap this up. Thanks for watching, and I may continue the stream for a little bit. I don't know, and do some Gem Wizards. But if you want to stick around for that, you're more than welcome. And if not, I'll catch you around. But I will take a quick break now for a couple minutes, and I will see you soon. Be right back.